Close your eyes. Not yet, wait. Wait just a moment longer. Breathe. Let the world you know the hum of electronics, the distant murmur of traffic, the soft pressure of the mattress beneath you. Let all of it recede, gently, the way a tide recedes from a dark shore. You are still here. You are still you. But for a little while, we are going somewhere else. Somewhere older than memory. Somewhere so far back in time that even the mountains have not yet settled into the shapes you know. We are going to the very edge of something enormous. A threshold that was crossed only once, and quietly, and without anyone to witness it. We are going to the last day. The very last day. Not the last day of a season, not the last day of a civilization, not the last day of a dynasty or a kingdom or an empire. We are going to the last day of an entire kind of human being. A creature who had lived on this earth for 300,000 years. A creature who had buried their dead, who had painted their bodies, who had held their children close against the cold. A creature who had looked up at the same stars you look at and felt, perhaps, something that we might almost dare to call wonder. Their last day has no date. No one recorded it. No monument was built. No story was told around a fire that night, because after that night, there were no more fires of that kind. There was simply an absence, a quieting, a door, closing slowly, softly, in a world that did not notice. But you are going to notice. Tonight, you are going to be there. So breathe. Settle deeper. Let your shoulders fall. Let your hands rest, open and still, the way hands rest when there is nothing left to hold on to and nothing left to fear. We begin in darkness. The darkness you are in right now is not empty. It is dense. It is warm with the smell of animal. Not unpleasant, not frightening, just old and alive and real, in the way that very few things in your world are still real. There is the smell of dried grass, of ash, of something faintly sweet and faintly sour, like fruit left too long in the sun. There is the smell of fur. There is the smell of breath. You are in a cave. Not a frightening cave. Not a vast, echoing cathedral of stone. A small cave, low-ceilinged, tucked into a limestone hillside, in what will someday be called Southern Europe, though that name does not exist yet. That concept does not exist yet. The idea that land belongs to anyone or anything does not exist yet. The cave is simply shelter. It is simply here, and you are simply here too. Around you, in the thick pre-dawn dark, you can hear breathing. Slow, deep, unconscious, breathing the breathing of sleep, the breathing of absolute safety, the breathing of bodies that have finally let go of the day. There are others here. How many? You cannot be sure. Perhaps 3, perhaps 5. You can feel their warmth without touching them. The air between you is shared. Your breath mingles with theirs in the darkness. And this is not strange. This is not intimate in any uncomfortable way. It is simply the oldest form of belonging. To breathe the same air, to sleep in the same small dark. The fire has burned down to coals. You can see them, faintly orange and deep red, glowing at the center of the cave like a second heartbeat. They pulse very slowly, the way sleeping things pulse. Occasionally, one of them collapses inward with a soft sigh of ash, and for a moment, the glow brightens slightly, then fades again. The coals are not going out. Not yet. They are simply resting, the way everything is resting, in this last hour before the world begins again. You should know something about the person sleeping closest to you. She is old. Old by the standards of this world, which are different from the standards of your world. Her face, if you could see it in this darkness, is not the face you might imagine when you imagine ancient humans not brutish, not savage, not simplified into something less than what you recognize. Her face is a face. It is weathered and broad and heavy-browed, yes, with a forehead that slopes and a jaw that juts slightly forward. But it is a face that has laughed. A face that has frowned in concentration over a difficult task. A face that has been pressed against the top of a child's head in the dark and breathed in. She is the last, or close to it. Perhaps she doesn't know. Perhaps she knows in some wordless way the way you sometimes know things before you have language for them, the way grief arrives before you understand what you have lost. She sleeps on, and the coals pulse, and the breathing continues, and outside the narrow mouth of the cave, the darkness is just barely, so barely you could almost miss it beginning to thin. Dawn, in this world, does not arrive the way dawn arrives in your world. In your world, dawn often arrives between notifications, between the alarm and the snooze, between the dream and the obligation. Dawn arrives as a fact, a timestamp, a transition. You know it is morning because a device tells you. You step into it the way you step into a room, already built, already lit, already waiting. Here, dawn is something else entirely. Here, dawn is an event, a cosmic event, a slow performance that the world puts on for no one and for everyone. And the performance has been running for 4 billion years without pause. It begins with a color change you cannot quite name. The black of the sky becomes a very dark blue. So dark, it is still almost black. But there is something in it now, something transparent, something that suggests depth. Then the blue deepens into something richer, something that in your language you might call indigo, though that word comes from a dye that hasn't been invented yet, from a trade route that doesn't exist yet, from a civilization that is tens of thousands of years in the future. The birds begin. A single call. First. Then silence. Then another call. From somewhere farther away, as if in answer. Then a third, and a fourth, and then the silence gives way entirely. And the world fills with sound in a way that your world almost never does sound, that has no source you need to identify, no threat you need to assess. Just the pure and ancient fact of living things waking up. The forest at the edge of the limestone hills is awake before the sun. It always is. The forest knows things about time that no one has written down. Inside the cave, the old woman stirs. She doesn't wake up the way you might. She doesn't lurch upright. She doesn't check anything. She doesn't orient herself to a schedule. She simply opens. Like a flower opens, but slower and less dramatic. Her breathing changes first. Then her hands shift slightly on the dried grass beneath her. Then her eyes open, and for a moment, they are completely empty. Not vacant, not absent, but genuinely open, genuinely receiving, the way eyes are. Before the mind catches up and starts deciding what things mean, she looks at the coals. She watches them for a long moment. Then she sits up, slowly, with the particular slowness of old bones that have slept on stone for too many decades. She reaches, without looking, to a pile of small sticks near the fire. She knows exactly where they are. She put them there herself last night, and she lays a few of them across the coals, gently, the way you might lay a blanket across something fragile. The fire catches. It catches slowly, then not slowly at all, and the cave fills with a warmth and a light that is orange and dancing and ancient. The shadows on the walls move. They have always moved like this. They will move like this in caves and around fires for thousands and thousands of years after this morning. Though the people who tend those fires will be a different kind of people. A people that shares something with her but is not her. A people that has taken something from her world and carried it forward, without knowing what they carried. She stares into the fire for a while. You don't know what she is thinking. You can't know. But you can sit with not knowing, which is itself a kind of knowing. The shape of the silence around her thoughts is something you can almost read. She is not afraid. That is the first thing you notice, really notice, as the morning begins. She is not afraid. She goes out just after the light becomes real. Real meaning you could see your hands by it, could see the shapes of trees, could navigate by it without stumbling. She goes out the way she always does, carefully, with the particular attention of someone who has learned to move through a world that does not always accommodate them. The air outside is cold. Cold enough that her breath makes small clouds that hang for a moment and then dissolve. It is late autumn, or perhaps early winter. The trees on the hillside have mostly lost their leaves, and what remain are the colors of old copper and rust. The ground is hard. Not frozen, but close to it. The frost from the night before still clings to the north-facing surfaces, to the undersides of rocks, to the places where the sun doesn't reach until mid-morning. She stands at the entrance of the cave and looks out at the valley below. Take a moment to look with her. The valley is wide and green in the places where the frost hasn't bitten it, and the river that runs through the bottom of it catches the early light and turns it into something bright and meaningless and beautiful. There are deer at the edge of the tree line, 3 of them, or perhaps 4, and they are doing what deer have always done at dawn, which is exist very carefully. Their heads come up and come down. Their ears move independently of each other, like small radars tracking a signal. They are not afraid of her yet. She is too far away, or too still, or the wind is wrong. She has hunted in this valley many times. The memory of those hunts lives in her body, as much as in her mind, in the tension she knows to carry in her left shoulder when she's approaching something, in the way her breath automatically slows and shallows when she sees prey, in the particular ache in her right knee that comes from years of crouching. Her body is a library. Her body is an archive. Everything she knows is written there, in the posture of her spine, in the calluses of her hands, in the way she instinctively tilts her head when she's listening for something. She will not hunt today. Maybe she knows this without forming the thought. Maybe the cold in her joints tells her, and her body reads the message without translating it into language. She simply watches the deer. She watches them for a long time. The sun comes up over the ridge and hits the valley floor, and everything becomes briefly luminous. The frost crystals on the grass, the water in the river, the pale undersides of the remaining leaves. And for a moment, the world looks the way the world sometimes looks when you're on the edge of sleep, burnished and significant and impossible to hold. She turns and goes back inside. There are 2 others in the cave. You understand this now, as the morning progresses and the fire warms the small space and the light from outside begins to push through the low entrance and touch the back wall. One of them is young, not a child, but young, a young adult perhaps, with a particular unfinished quality of something that has not yet fully arrived at what it is going to be. He sleeps on his side with his knees drawn up and his hands pressed together under his cheek, like a child in a picture. And, watching him sleep, you feel something move in your chest that is not quite sadness and not quite tenderness, and is perhaps both compounded. The other is older than young, but not as old as she is. He is awake, or mostly awake, lying still with his eyes open and his gaze pointed at the ceiling of the cave, which is unremarkable, just limestone, just the slow geological record of millions of years of compression and dissolution. He might be thinking. He might be doing something that precedes thinking, some state of mind that doesn't have a name in your language because your language developed to describe a different kind of mind. They don't speak to each other, the 3 of them, not yet. The morning has a texture to it that doesn't require speech. They communicate in smaller ways, a shift of the body, a glance held and then released. The way one of them adds wood to the fire that says, without words, I am here, I am tending this, this is mine to tend. You watch them, and you try to understand what you are seeing. You have been taught perhaps, or you have absorbed somehow, the story of Neanderthals as something primitive, something less, something that was outcompeted and replaced, which implies a kind of inadequacy, a kind of failure to be modern enough. But sitting here in this cave, watching these 3 people wake into their morning, you can feel how wrong that framing is, how small it is, how much it says about the storytellers, and how little it says about the story. These people are not primitive. They are not failed humans. They are not an early draft of you. They are complete. They are fully arrived at what they are. They have a relationship with this landscape that is so deep and so intricate that it would take you a lifetime, several lifetimes, to begin to read it. They know the soil of this valley the way you know the faces of the people you love. They know the river's moods. They know which plants are good in which season, which rocks hold warmth the longest, which direction the wind comes from when the weather is about to change. They carry knowledge that is not written anywhere, and will not be written anywhere. And when they are gone, all of it will simply be gone, the way a particular quality of light is gone when the season changes. The young one opens his eyes. He looks at the old woman for a moment, and she looks back at him, and something passes between them that is not nothing. The work of the morning is unhurried. This is not laziness. This is not the absence of purpose. This is the pace that the world actually runs at, the pace beneath the pace you think you live at, the steady and unglamorous rhythm of survival that has nothing to do with efficiency and everything to do with continuity. The old woman works with her hands. She is working a piece of flint, seated near the entrance of the cave where the light is good, turning the stone over in her hands, with a patience that is geological in its quality. She has a small piece of antler that she uses as a pressure tool, and she applies it to the edge of the flint with a precision that would surprise you if you tried it and found how difficult it is. With each small application of pressure, a thin flake of flint peels away, and the edge becomes a little sharper, a little more specific, a little more what she intends it to be. She has done this thousands of times. The first time she did it, she was very young, and her hands shook with the effort of concentration, and the flint broke wrong, and she felt whatever it is you feel when a thing breaks wrong. A small frustration, a small embarrassment, a resolve to do better. Someone showed her. Someone patient showed her how to read the stone, how to feel for the direction of the grain, how to apply force at exactly the angle that produces what you want, instead of what the stone wants to do on its own. She thinks of that person sometimes. The person who showed her, they are gone now. Gone the way people go in this world, which is usually not slowly and usually not gently, and usually not with adequate time for goodbye. She carries them in the way she holds the flint, in the angle of her wrist, in the particular patience she brings to a difficult edge. The man is doing something with sinew, wrapping it around the joint between a wooden shaft and a stone point, winding it tight in a specific pattern that he has worked out over years, testing and adjusting, learning what holds and what gives way. His hands move with the same quality as hers, automatic and precise. The hands of someone who has done this so many times that the work lives in the hands themselves and barely requires the supervision of thought. The young one has gone out. You can hear him, distantly, moving through the brush on the slope below the cave. He is not hunting. He is looking for something you can tell by the quality of his movement, the way he stops and starts, the occasional sound of him crouching and rising. Maybe he is looking for late-season roots. Maybe he is looking for something specific, something he was told to look for by someone no longer here to tell him anything. The morning deepens. The sun climbs. The frost finishes melting. The birds shift from their dawn chorus to their mid-morning quieter conversations. A hawk appears above the valley, circles 3 times in a thermal, and disappears. The deer from this morning are gone, moved off into the forest, following their own logic, their own curriculum, their own relationship with this landscape. Inside the cave, the fire ticks and breathes. Outside, the world is doing what the world does, which is continuing, which is all it has ever done, which is all it will ever do. There is something I want you to feel, here, in this mid-morning quiet. Something important. Something that the science tells us, and that the science almost undersells, because the science tends to speak in percentages and genetic markers, and what gets lost in the percentages and the markers is what they actually mean. You carry her, not as a metaphor, not as a poetic gesture. Literally, in the cells of your body, in the coiled architecture of your DNA, you carry traces of her people. If you are of non-African ancestry, approximately 1 to 4% of your genome comes from Neanderthals from moments of contact and interbreeding that happened tens of thousands of years ago. When modern humans and Neanderthals lived alongside each other, shared some of the same territories, perhaps shared some of the same stories. What did they share? They shared more than genes. They shared pigment. Probably Neanderthals used ochre, the same red mineral that every human culture in history has used for bodily decoration, for ritual, for the marking of importance. They shared feathers. Possibly evidence suggests they collected eagle talons and raptor feathers for adornment, long before modern humans arrived in Europe. They shared, almost certainly, something we cannot find in the fossil record, but must infer from the shape of everything else. Something that functioned, like music, like rhythm, like the impulse to make a sound that has no survival value and every emotional value. They buried their dead. This is the thing that stays with you. Once you know it. Once you know it, you cannot unknow it. They buried their dead. At the site of Shanidar, in what is now Iraq. The remains of a Neanderthal were found buried with what may have been flowers, the pollen of wildflowers concentrated around the body in a pattern that some researchers believe was deliberate, intentional, a gesture, a last gesture. Someone saying, in the only language available, this matters. This person mattered. The ending of this person is not nothing. Whether or not the flowers were placed deliberately, and the debate continues, and will probably always continue, the impulse to ask the question tells you something about yourself. The fact that you find it moving, the fact that you feel something shift in your chest when you imagine flowers placed on a grave 40,000 years ago, tells you something essential about what you are and where you come from, and what you share with the old woman sitting in this cave, working this flint, breathing this cold air. You share the impulse to mark endings. You share the understanding, however dim, however wordless, that some things matter, that people matter, that their passing is not just a biological event, but a loss with a weight that must be acknowledged. You share, perhaps, the ache of that. The afternoon comes in slowly, the way autumn afternoons do, the light changing its angle, losing its directness, becoming something more lateral and golden and a little melancholy. The shadows of the trees grow long and reach across the valley floor. The temperature begins to drop, not quickly, just steadily, the way cold always comes when you're not watching closely. The young one has come back. He brought something, a bundle of roots wrapped in a large leaf, and some dried berries from a cache he apparently knew about, and he lays these things near the fire with a satisfaction that is quiet and uncomplicated. He didn't find much, but he found something. The something is real and present, and will feed them tonight, and the finding of it was the work of the day, and the work of the day is done. The three of them eat in the mid-afternoon, unhurried. The roots are cooked in the coals, pushed into the hot ash at the edge of the fire, and left there, while the old woman sharpens her flint some more, and the man finishes his binding work, and the young one sits near the entrance of the cave and watches the valley, with the unfocused attention of someone who is not watching for anything specific, but is just watching, just being present to the world in the way that the world rewards if you are patient enough. You eat with them, or you imagine eating with them. The root, when it comes from the coals, is hot and a little bitter and a little sweet, and you have to blow on it and pass it from hand to hand and be patient with it, and the patience is its own flavor. The berries are tart. They taste like the tail end of summer, like something that was abundance and is now just the memory of abundance, preserved in a small, sweet, sour thing you hold on your tongue for a moment before swallowing. After eating, there is rest. Not sleep. Not yet just the particular quiet that follows a meal. The settling of the body into itself. The temporary peace of appetite met. The old woman leans back against the cave wall and closes her eyes. Not sleeping. That, just resting behind her closed eyes, the way you sometimes rest, letting the world continue without requiring anything of you for a few minutes. You could ask, if you could ask her, what do you see when you close your eyes? What is the inside of your mind like? Is it the same as the inside of mine? You cannot ask. And she could not answer in a language you share. But the question is not nothing. The fact that you can ask it, the fact that you recognize in her the possibility of an inner life that is not yours and not empty, says something important about both of you. In the middle of the afternoon, the man and the young one have a conversation. It is not what you might imagine a conversation to look like. There are sounds, not exactly words, or perhaps they are words. The debate about Neanderthal language is ongoing and probably irresolvable. But there are sounds that carry meaning, that are clearly intended, that the listener clearly receives. But alongside the sounds, and perhaps more than the sounds, there are gestures. A hand indicating a direction, an expression that asks a question, a tilt of the head that acknowledges, a pause that is itself a kind of speech. They are talking about tomorrow, maybe, or maybe about the weather, which has the heavy, pewter quality of snow coming. And the question of snow is not abstract. For them it is practical, immediate, consequential. Snow changes everything. Snow changes where you can go, and how long it takes to get there, and what you can find, and how much energy it costs to find it. Or maybe they are talking about something entirely different. Maybe they are doing what people do, which is talking about things that aren't immediately practical, things that are just interesting, things that are worth saying aloud even if no action follows from them. Neanderthals were not automatons. They were not simply stimulus response machines in hominin bodies. The evidence of their culture, the pigment, the feathers, the burials, the carefully crafted tools that show not just function, but aesthetic preference, all of it points toward an inner life that was richer and stranger and more interior than the old stories gave them credit for. They had opinions. This is what you find yourself thinking, watching them. They had opinions. The old woman had preferences. The young man found some things interesting and other things boring. The middle-aged man had habits that the others perhaps found endearing or irritating. They had their rhythms and their patterns and their small, private world of shared references, the way that three people who have survived together through enough seasons inevitably develop. They were not lonely in the way you might imagine. Or perhaps they were. Perhaps there was a particular loneliness to their diminishment, to the slow contraction of their world. As the winters became harsher, and the familiar faces became fewer, and the territory they knew shrank and shrank, until it was this valley, this hillside, this cave. Perhaps the old woman carried a loneliness that was not personal but collective, the loneliness of a people becoming few, though she would not have that framing for it, would not have those words. She would have the feeling. There is a word in your language, or rather, there are many words in many languages for the feeling of being the last one, the one who remains when others are gone, the one who carries what used to be shared. In some languages, it is the word for survivor. In others, it is closer to the word for witness. In others still, it is a word that has no direct translation but means something like the keeper of the last light of something. She may be that, or she may not know she is that. This is the question you cannot answer from where you sit, watching her work in the afternoon light. But consider, she has lived long enough to lose people, long enough to remember a world that was fuller than this one, long enough to notice the particular silence that comes when a voice you expected to hear is no longer there. She has counted, in whatever way she counts, not with numbers perhaps, but with presences and absences, with the felt weight of who is at the fire and who is not. She has counted, and found the number smaller than it was. This is grief. Whatever else it is grief. And grief is very old. Grief is older than civilization. Grief is older than agriculture, older than pottery, older than the wheel. Grief may be as old as love itself, which is to say, as old as the moment when one living creature became capable of mattering to another, when one life became, to another life, irreplaceable. She has known irreplaceable things. Think about that for a moment. In this world that you might be tempted to see as simplified, as stripped back, as bare, there were irreplaceable things. There were individuals who could not be substituted for by other individuals. There were relationships that were specific, particular, unrepeatable. There were people who were known by name, or whatever the equivalent of name was in her world, who were known for particular qualities, who were relied upon for particular things, who left a specific absence when they were gone. This is not simple. This is as complicated as anything you know. The man sitting near the cave entrance, finishing his binding work, she has known him for years. She knew him when he was younger, when the world was less contracted than it is now, when there were more fires burning on more hillsides in this region, and the smoke of them was sometimes visible from high ground. She knew him differently then. Not better, not worse, differently. The way you know someone differently at different stages of your shared life. The way the texture of a long relationship changes and deepens, and sometimes thins, and sometimes breaks, and sometimes, against expectation, holds. It has held, through winters that were harder than they should have been, through seasons when the animals moved differently, and the expected abundance did not arrive, through losses, the losses that she carries in her body, the way the valley carries the memory of the river. Even in the stretches where the river runs shallow or underground, loss leaves a shape, the shape of what was there. She looks at him now, and you watch her look. It is not a sentimental look. It is not the look of someone thinking about the past. in a wistful or elegiac way. It is the look of someone fully in the present, registering what is there. He is there. His hands are there, moving with their familiar competence. His breath makes a small white cloud in the cool air, and then dissolves, as breath does, as everything does eventually. He looks up, briefly. Their eyes meet. Something passes between them that has no name in your language, because the category it belongs to, the category of things communicated between people who have shared many years and many fires and many sleepings in the same small dark, that category doesn't need a name. It is simply recognition. Simply. I see you. Simply. You are still here, and so am I. He looks back down at his work. She looks back at the hillside, and the afternoon continues, unhurried, laying its long gold light across the valley. You carry this moment with you, or you try to. The trying is its own kind of carrying. You cannot hold it completely. You could not hold any moment completely, even the moments of your own life. Memory is not a recording. It is a reconstruction. Every time you return to a memory, you are rebuilding it slightly differently, with slightly different emphasis, in slightly different light. The past is not fixed. The past is alive in the way that only things that are being tended remain alive. Someone is tending this past. You are, right now, in the act of imagining her, in the act of sitting with the question of what her last day might have looked like, felt like, smelled like. You are performing a small act of preservation, not of facts, not of data, but of attention. The attention that says, this mattered. This person mattered. The ending of this kind of being in the world is worth sitting with, worth imagining, worth the quiet weight of a late night spent in consideration. That attention is its own form of fire. It warms things. It illuminates things. It requires tending, and it goes out when untended, and when it goes out, something is darker than it was before. Do not let it go out yet. There is still time. The afternoon is still here, and the gold light, and the man with his work, and the young one somewhere on the hillside, and the old woman who has lived long enough to be the keeper of this small fire of 3 people in a world that is growing quieter around them. She tends what she can tend. That is all any of us do. The sun is lower now, much lower. The gold of it has deepened into something more orange, more autumnal, more final in the way that late daylight is always a little final, not threatening, just honest. This day, like every day, is moving toward its end. The valley below is filling with the first thin tendril of shadow, rising from the river upward toward the hillsides. The trees at the edge of the wood are turning into silhouettes. The birds are beginning their evening conversations. There is a kind of bird call, you know it even here, even in this ancient world, because it hasn't changed. This call, in tens of thousands of years, that has the quality of completion, of summing up, of the day accounting for itself in the last of its light. You have heard this call before, maybe on an evening when you were outside somewhere, camping or walking, or simply not inside for once, and the light was going and the air was cooling, and you heard this sound and felt, for a moment, entirely and unexpectedly at peace. That sound is here, now, in this world. Let it settle over you. Let it mean what it always means, which is, this was a day. This day happened. It is passing now. Let it pass. The old woman comes back to the entrance of the cave. She stands there in the last of the light, and she looks out over the valley the same way she looked this morning, but the look is different now. This morning the look was outward, anticipatory, oriented toward what might happen. Now the look is more inward, more reflective, more the look of someone at the end of a day reviewing it, finding it. Finding it what? Sufficient? No, quite the right word. Finding it real. Finding it complete in the way that only ending gives things. She lifts her head slightly and looks at the sky. The first stars are not yet visible, but the sky has the color that comes just before stars, a deep, clear blue-violet in the east, still pale and faintly orange in the west, where the sun has recently gone. The moon is up, a thin crescent, very white against the darkening east. She sees it. Her eyes rest on it for a moment. She has been looking at this moon her whole life. Her mother looked at it, her mother's mother, back and back and back. The moon has been looked at by people who are her people. This same moon, this same pale crescent in the darkening sky, this same cold light falling on faces that are different, and faces that are the same, and faces that have not yet come into being. You are looking at the same moon. Right now, when you close your eyes and feel the weight of your eyelids and the warmth of the blanket and the particular quality of quiet in the room around you, the moon outside your window is the same moon. It has not changed. It has not aged in any way that matters. The light it throws is the same light it threw on her face on her last evening, in her last light. This is not nothing. This is not nothing at all. Night comes the way night comes in autumn decisively, once it makes up its mind. The temperature drops noticeably, suddenly, and the cave, which was merely cool in the afternoon, becomes a place where the fire's warmth matters again, is actively sought and appreciated. The old woman builds the fire up. She does this with the same quiet competence she brings to everything selecting pieces of wood, with the particular knowledge of someone who has learned which kinds burn long and which burn fast and which smoke too much and which make the cave smell of something almost pleasant. She builds it methodically, from small to large, from kindling to branches, and when it catches properly, she sits back and watches it the way you watch something that you have made, with a quiet satisfaction that is not pride exactly, just the plain acknowledgement that a thing was needed and you made it happen. The three of them eat again, the remaining roots and the berries from this afternoon, and it is not a feast, but it is enough. Enough has a particular flavor. Enough tastes different from abundance. It is quieter, more focused, less celebratory, but it satisfies in its own way, the way things satisfy when they are sufficient to the need. After the meal, in the fire's warmth, they stay close. This is worth noticing, not the closeness of people who are cold and sharing body heat, though they are cold and do share body heat, but the closeness of people who are comfortable with each other, who have been close long enough that closeness has become the default, the absence of which would be strange. The young one leans slightly against the man's arm without thinking about it. The old woman's hand rests near the young one's knee, not touching, but near. Are they happy? The question almost dissolves under examination. Happy is a word with a complicated history, a word that means different things to different people, in different times, and in different languages. But there is something here, in this cave, in this firelight, in this closeness, that does not seem like its opposite. There is something here that is not suffering, that is not desperation, that is not the dark interior of a creature that cannot imagine its own experience. There is presence, there is warmth, there is the specific comfort of not being alone in the dark. These things are not nothing. These things may be, in fact, the things that matter most, more than what you have, more than what you achieve, more than what you are remembered for. To be warm, to be not alone, to watch the fire and feel, in whatever register feeling happens in a mind like hers, that the world is a thing you can be in, a thing you can inhabit, a thing that accommodates you, even just tonight, even just in this small cave on this hillside, above this valley, with its river and its deer, and its pale crescent moon. The fire burns lower. You have been here long enough now that you know the rhythm of it, how it builds and peaks and settles, how the conversation, such as it is, gestural and sparse and sufficient, follows the same arc. The young one is already asleep. He went quickly, the way young things go one moment present and the next moment entirely elsewhere, in whatever landscape the sleeping mind makes from the material of the waking day. The man is nearly there. His eyes open and close. Open, close. Stay closed a little longer each time. The old woman is still awake. She is the last one awake, and this is probably not unusual. She is probably often the last one awake, the keeper of the fire past the point when the others let it go, the one who sits in the diminishing light, and does whatever it is she does in that private hour, thinks, remembers, feels the particular quality of late-night awareness, which is different from the awareness of any other time of day, softer, more permeable, the boundaries between now and then more porous. She feeds the fire one more time, The last piece of wood she adds carefully, because this is the last good piece. And after this there are only small things, enough to last until morning, enough to keep the coals alive. She has done this calculation many times before. She knows the math of the fire, the economy of warmth, the investment of care that returns in survival. The wood catches. The fire brightens. The shadows on the cave wall move, and then still. She sits back. In the silence, you can hear everything. The breathing of the sleeping ones, the faint tick of the fire, the distant sound of an owl somewhere in the valley, the wind moving through the leafless branches of the trees on the hillside. The world is enormous, and very close. The world is pressing against the thin membrane of the cave entrance, and the fire is the only thing holding it at the right distance. Not too close, not too far. She pulls her knees up slightly, rests her heavy forearms across them. This posture, knees up, arms resting, body curved around its own warmth, is one of the oldest postures in the world. You know this posture. You have been in this posture, in your own bed, in your own dark, in the particular privacy of the late hour when the rest of your world is asleep, and you are briefly, privately, entirely alone with what you know, and what you feel, and what you cannot quite put into words. She looks into the fire. You look with her. Fire. You have to think about what fire meant in a world where fire was not guaranteed. In your world, fire is a switch, a burner, a click, a constant. In her world, fire is a relationship ongoing, requiring tending, capable of being lost. The care that goes into keeping a fire alive over days and nights is a kind of devotion, a daily practice of attending to something that will go out if you stop attending. Humans have had fire for a very long time, perhaps as long as 1 million years in various controlled forms. Neanderthals used fire. This is beyond serious debate. They used it for warmth, for cooking, for light, for tool making, perhaps for signaling, perhaps for things we can only guess at. Fire is part of what made them human, part of what separated them from the cold, part of what allowed them to survive in a world that would otherwise have been insuperably difficult. And fire does something else. Fire does something to the mind. There's research, recent research, recent enough that it came long after her time, but would not have surprised her had she known of it, suggesting that firelight specifically, campfire light, triggers a particular state of relaxation, of social openness, of willingness to enter the kind of deep conversation that daylight activities tend to preclude. That the flicker of flame at a certain distance and a certain brightness does something to human attention, draws it inward, makes people more reflective, more expansive, more willing to talk about things that matter. Storytelling, some researchers believe, evolved around the fire, not in a metaphorical sense, in a literal sense. The specific conditions of evening firelight may have been the context in which humans first began to tell stories, to transmit knowledge in narrative form, to say, let me tell you what happened. Let me tell you what this means. Let me tell you what to remember. The fire created the conditions for meaning making. She is in those conditions now. You are in those conditions now, in a different way in the firelight of language, in the warmth of a story, in the late-night context that is not so different from what she knows. What stories did she carry? You cannot know, but you can feel the weight of them. You can feel that she is not empty, that the interior of her mind is not a blank, that she has accumulated in 60 years, or however many years. She has a library of experience and observation and interpretation that is hers alone, that will not survive her, that is already beginning, in a sense, to end. This is what it means for something to be lost. Not the abstract loss of a species, not the statistical disappearance of a population, but this, the particular library of this particular mind, accumulated over a particular lifetime, ending, as all libraries end, as your library will end too, as every library ends, one at a time, quietly, in the dark. The fire is very low now, just embers again, like this morning, like every morning has been preceded by a night exactly like this one. The embers pulsing, the darkness close, the world outside, very large and very old, and continuing without pause. The old woman is still awake, or perhaps She is at the edge of sleep, that particular border, where the thoughts begin to lose their edges and connect to each other in ways they don't connect in the waking mind, where the present moment begins to admit the past freely, where memory and sensation blur. She is thinking about someone who was not here. You don't know who. A child, perhaps, who did not survive. A partner. Perhaps the word companion doesn't quite work, nor does husband or mate, but something in that direction. Someone who slept beside her for years, and then one day was simply gone, the way things in this world go. A parent. A friend. An elder who taught her things she still carries, whose hands she can still see in her mind, whose voice, or whatever it was, the particular sound of communication between her people, she can still almost hear. She is not alone, even in this. The dead are never entirely gone. This is one of the things that makes humans, all kinds of humans, what they are. The dead persist in the living, not as ghosts, not as supernatural presences, but as lived experience, as memory, as the particular shape that a lost person leaves in the space around those who knew them. The old woman carries her dead the way you carry yours, the way everyone does. This is perhaps the deepest thing you share with her, not the DNA, though you share that too. Not the fire, though you share that. Not the stars, though you share those. The deepest thing you share with her is the experience of loss, and the way loss transforms into a kind of presence, the way someone who is gone can still be with you, in the dark, in the quiet, in the particular hour when the fire is low, and the world outside is very still. She closes her eyes, not gone yet, just resting, just letting the dark be dark, and the quiet be quiet. You have been here a long time now, long enough to feel the weight of the day in your own body, the particular gravity of a day that has been fully inhabited, fully present, fully itself. Let that weight settle. Let it pull you downward, gently, into the comfortable dark of your own cave, the cave of your bed, the cave of this night, the cave of sleep, which is also very old and very deep, and has been here longer than you have, and will be here after you are gone. Sleep is the oldest thing we do, older than fire, older than tools, older than language, even before there were humans, before there were hominins, before there were mammals. The ancestors of everything alive practiced some version of this. The daily surrender, the letting go, the trust that the world will continue without your attention for a few hours, and you will be permitted to return to it in the morning. She is entering that trust now. Her breathing has changed, you can hear it, slower and deeper than before. The breathing of someone who is almost entirely elsewhere. The tension in her shoulders, visible even in the dim ember light, has released. Her hands, which have been doing things all day, making things, tending things, reaching for things, lie open and still. Hands at rest look like nothing else. Hands at rest are the most complete version of rest. The embers pulse, once, twice. A slow, orange heartbeat. Outside, a branch falls somewhere in the trees. A small sound, immediate and then gone. Something moves in the underbrush below the hillside. A hedgehog, perhaps, or a small mammal going about its own nocturnal business, carrying its own ancient curriculum, minding its own affairs. The moon has moved. Hours have passed. The crescent has arced across the sky and is now lower in the west, closer to the tree line, smaller, seeming in the thicker air near the horizon. In a little while, it will be gone, and the stars will be at their most dense, their most uncountable, the Milky Way visible as a river of light if you are outside to see it. But you are inside, where it is warm, where the embers still hold. In 100,000 years, some things will remain. Not much. Not the wooden tools, not the sinew wrapping, not the dried roots, not the berries, not the stories, whatever they were, not the sounds of their voices, not the particular way the young one smiled when he found the cache of berries this afternoon, assuming he smiled, not the old woman's memories of the people she has lost. But some things will remain. The flint she worked today might remain. Stone is patient. Stone does not biodegrade. Somewhere in the limestone hillside above this cave, there is a scatter of flint, flakes the byproducts of her morning's work, that will still be there, buried, preserved, until someone digs them up and examines them and tries to understand what they mean, tries to understand who made them and how and why, and what that person was thinking. And the bones. The bones last longest. Somewhere in a cave, perhaps this cave, the bones of these people or people like them will rest in the earth for tens of thousands of years. They will change. Slowly, minerals will replace minerals. The original substance will transform into something harder and more permanent, but the shape will remain. The shape of a heavy brow. The shape of a broad nasal cavity. The shape of hands that made things and tended fires and touched other hands in the dark. Someone will find them. Someone, in a future this woman cannot imagine, in a world built on things that don't exist yet. You will find these bones and hold them with a particular reverence that humans bring to very old things, the same reverence you feel right now, perhaps, thinking about them. And that person will ask the same questions you are asking tonight. Who was this? What were they like? What did they feel? What did they know? The questions themselves are the inheritance. The ability to ask them. The desire to ask them. The particular human need to look backward into time and feel something. To feel not just curiosity, but connection. Not just interest, but kinship. That need is yours. It is also theirs. It is old enough that they had it too, looking back at their own ancestors, whoever those ancestors were, in whatever form the looking back took. You are the answer to a question she didn't know she was asking. She is part of the answer to questions you didn't know you had. She is asleep now. Fully, deeply asleep. The slow and total sleep that comes to those who have worked and moved and used their bodies in the ways bodies are made to be used. The cave is quiet. All three of them sleep. The fire is just coals, barely visible, just enough to warm the small space, just enough to hold the dark at bay. This is her last day. Or perhaps it is not. Perhaps tomorrow she will wake again. And the day after that, perhaps there is still some small reserve of time left to her, and to the two who sleep beside her. We cannot know. The last day of the last Neanderthal is not marked anywhere. It left no inscription. The world did not pause. The birds did not go silent. The river in the valley continued to run, as rivers do, without caring what is happening on the banks. But tonight, this night, feels like a last night. Not because it is desperate, or dark, or full of grief. It isn't any of those things. But because of the quality of its completeness. Because of the way it holds everything. The morning, and the work, and the meal, and the fire, and the sleeping others, and the crescent moon, and the embers. Because of the way it is, simply, and entirely, itself. Every last thing is the most itself it has ever been. This is true of days. This is true of seasons. This is true of species. The last individual of any kind carries all of it, all the accumulated way of being in the world that the species developed over its long existence, and carries it with a completeness that is, in its way, a kind of grace. She carries it now, sleeping. It rises and falls with her breath. You are still here, in your bed, in your room, in your life, which is very different from her life, and also, in the ways that matter most, not as different as it first appears. You breathe. She breathed. You need warmth. She needed warmth. You lose people. She lost people. You look at the moon and feel something. She looked at the moon and felt something. You are lying in the dark right now, and you are not alone in the dark, not really. You are accompanied by 40,000 years of people who have lain in the dark and looked at the ceiling and felt the weight of the day leaving their bodies and breathed, just as you are breathing now, into the approaching quiet of sleep. They are not ghosts. They are not watching over you. They are simply part of the fabric that made you possible. Part of the long, unlikely, beautiful chain of continuity that runs from her, in her cave, with her coals, to you, right now, wherever you are. You are what happened next. Not in a triumphant sense. Not in the sense that you are better, or more evolved, or more adapted, or more anything. Just in the sense that after her, there was more. There was more time and more people and more fire and more stories and more loss and more love and more of everything that makes up a life. And eventually, at the end of a very long and complicated sequence of events that no one planned and no one designed, and that required an almost unimaginable amount of luck and heartbreak and survival, there was you. Here, now, breathing. That is not nothing. That is everything. The fire is almost out. In the cave, in the dark, on the hillside, above the valley, with its river and its deer and its stars, the last embers are cooling. Not out, not yet, but cooling, moving toward the state that all fire moves toward when left untended. The slow release of heat back into the world. The dispersal of what was gathered. The return of warmth to the air it came from. This is not sad. This is what happens. This is what has always happened. Every fire that was ever lit eventually became coals, became embers, became ash, became the ground beneath the next fire. The heat dispersed. The light faded. And in the morning, someone would build it again. Let your thoughts do what the fire does. Let them release. Let them cool. Let them drift apart from each other and stop insisting on their connections. The day is done. This long journey is done. You have been very far away, and now you are coming back. Not all the way back, not yet, but starting the return that sleep will complete. The old woman sleeps. The young one sleeps. The valley is still and dark, and full of the ordinary miracle of a world continuing to exist without anyone's assistance, without anyone's permission, without anyone's awareness. The stars are very bright. If you could be outside right now in your world, in her world, in any world in the long chain between them, the stars would be very bright and very far away and very old, and the light you would see from them would have traveled for years, or decades, or centuries, or millennia to arrive at your eye, to arrive at that precise moment of seeing. Some of that starlight left its source before she was born. Some of it left its source before her species existed. And it arrives at your eye now, tonight, in this moment, and you receive it. You receive it without knowing where it came from, or how long it traveled, or what it passed through on its way to you. This is what it is to be alive in time. To receive things from very far away, and very long ago. To carry, without knowing you carry it, the light of what came before. The morning always comes. It came for her. In her time, the same slow brightening. The same shift from black to indigo to blue. The same birds, the same frost. Whether that morning was her last or not, it came. The world offered it without judgment, without fanfare, without any awareness of what it was offering or to whom. The morning comes for you too. Sometime, not yet, not while you are still settling into the soft dark of sleep, but sometime the light will return. The room will change around you from a dark space to a light one, slowly, the way it always changes, the way it has always changed. And you will be in it, continuant, breathing. Something from her will be in you, something unnamed, carried in the chemistry of your cells, in the particular configuration of proteins and processes that makes you resistant to some things and susceptible to others, that shapes your immune response, that influences things you don't know are being influenced. Science has found traces of Neanderthal DNA in the genomes of people alive today. Not many, but real. Not everything, but something. A trace. A signature. A very faint mark left in a margin. She is in you. Not personally. Not memorably. Not in any way you could point to and say, here, this is where she lives. But in some way that is real, she persists in the long biological echo of her existence, in the questions her existence raises, in the fact that you can be moved by the thought of her last evening, by the thought of her coals and her cave and her sleeping companions and her pale crescent moon. The capacity to be moved by this, to feel something for a person who lived 40,000 years ago, in a cave, on a hillside, in a world you will never fully understand, that capacity is also very old. It is older than history. It is older than writing. It may be one of the oldest things about you. It is not a small thing. Empathy across time. Grief for people you never met. the imagination of other lives, other interiors, other ways of being in a world that is the same world, and also completely different. These things are what separate you from an object and make you a subject, a experiencing thing, a meaning-making thing, a thing that asks questions that have no final answers and keeps asking them anyway because the asking itself is the point. She asked questions too. In whatever form questions took in her mind, in whatever gesture or silence or gaze into the fire, she asked them. And now, it's time to sleep. Let the questions rest. They'll still be there when you wake. The world will still have its mysteries, its losses, its long prehistory full of faces we'll never know. The morning will still be waiting. The birds will still begin with a single note and then dissolve into chorus. The light will still arrive as if for the first time, as it has always arrived, as it will go on arriving. Tonight, you were with someone at the end of something enormous. You witnessed it. In the only way it can be witnessed, through imagination, through empathy, through the willingness to sit with not knowing and feel something anyway. That is enough. That is more than enough. Let your breath slow. Let the weight of your body sink. Let the thoughts drift apart like embers that have stopped connecting. Somewhere in the very old dark, the coals are cooling. And somewhere in you warm, alive, continuous, the fire still holds. Sleep now. Sleep.